much. So welcome to the final session of our science communication webinar series, Innovating Through Communication. It is great to have you with us today, and we are looking forward to a lively and inspiring conversation. I'm Margarida Palma, Technical and Scientific Director at Food for Sustainability, and I will be your moderator today. I should also say that I have a real passion for science communication, especially when it comes to engaging young people. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers today. This session is being recorded, so in case you don't want to appear in the video, please make sure your camera is off. So in our last session, we looked at how science communication is more than just sharing results, research results. It's also about standing for values like children's rights, making complex ideas like food sovereignty and food security easier to understand, and also using storytelling to bring science closer to people's lives. So what really stood out was how communication acts as a bridge between science and society, helping communities get involved, sparking meaningful conversations and turning research into real impact. So today we are excited to continue that journey with three fantastic speakers who bring a wealth of experience in making science communication practical, creative, and powerful. So first, we will hear from Ignasi Bartomeus, a community ecologist from Doñana Biological Station in Sevilla. Ignasi studies how big environmental changes like climate change, land use, and invasive species affect pollinators and ecosystems. He will talk about how it takes complex scientific research and turns it into messages that really connect with people, whether for conservation or policy. Next up is Adriano Cerqueira, a science journalist and the creator of the award-winning podcast 90 Seconds of Science at ITQB. Adriano will share how short, engaging formats like this one can help get science across a wider audiences and give us some tips on how to keep messages clear and compelling. Finally, we will have Carol Delmazo, who brings over 10 years of experience in science communication and project management. She worked on the ReSEED project that was funded by the European Research Council and now supports outreach and community building at Opera's research infrastructure. Carol will show us how targeted communication, trust building, and good storytelling can make a big difference in how research connects with the real world. So let's dive in and explore how we can all innovate through communication, whether we are researchers, journalists, or just curious minds looking to make science more open, engaging, and impactful. We hope these talks inspire you to reflect on your own communication strategies and on the power of connecting science and society. Let me just say that these webinars are brought to you by Food for Sustainability, a collaborative laboratory that is dedicated to driving innovation in sustainable and regenerative food production. Food for Sustainability works closely with farmers, researchers, and industry partners to transform food systems for a healthier planet. This webinar series is delivered on behalf of the GROW Consortium, an initiative under EIT Food, Europe's leading food innovation community dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and change makers develop solutions for a better food future. So before we begin, a quick reminder. If you haven't already, be sure to register for the upcoming Healthy Soil for Life Summer School. So this is your chance to dive deep into soil health, regeneration, and healthy diets. This year, we are excited to announce that we will have a Michelin-starred chef joining us on the menu. So the spots are filling up quickly, so don't wait. And before we jump into the speakers' presentations, we have prepared a quick Slido poll to get a feel for the audience. So we'd love to hear from you. So please follow the link that Rita will put on the chat, and or just this QR code. We'll be very glad to know if the audience is aware of some statistics about science communication. You have now time to enter in this link or scan this QR code. So we have now here the first question, which is, how are many small and medium scale farmers in the Iberian Peninsula assessing practical knowledge about sustainable and climate smart farming? So is it by enrolling in university level agricultural science programs? Is it by from viral farming trends on social media platforms? By subscribing to international agro-business magazines, or through local agricultural cooperatives, trainings, workshops, and rural extension services. So we have here a winner. So this is the correct answer. So through local agricultural cooperatives, yes, this is the correct answer. Training workshops and rural extension services. So this is how it works in our Iberian Peninsula. So farmers often adopt sustainable practices similar to organic farming, with knowledge transfer facilitated usually by personal interactions, local networks, and regional initiatives rather than formal academic programs or international media. So you know the answer to this question. So let's move to the second question. Yes, what communication method has shown a 30 to 50% improvement in retention of sustainability concepts? Is it scientific textbooks with more images, infographics, comics, and animations, MOOCs, which stands for Massive Online Open Courses, or podcast? So people are still voting. So the winner is infographics, I think. So it has stopped. So the winner is infographics, comics, and animations, and the audience knows the answer. Yes. So infographics, comics, and animations have been shown to significantly improve retention of sustainability concepts like biodiversity, regenerative agriculture, for example, by 30 to 50% compared to text-based communication. So multiple studies highlight that infographics and visual storytelling methods enhance memory retention, engagement, and understanding of complex information by presenting it in a visually appealing and memorable way. So well done. Well done. So let's move to the third question. So it says, approximately what percentage of podcasts worldwide are dedicated to science content? So Adriano probably knows the answer to this question. Let's wait a little bit. So give time to the audience to reply. Okay, so, and the correct answer is 2%. So the audience knows the answers to these questions. Yes, it's 2%. So a comprehensive analysis of global podcast production found that approximately 2% of all podcasts are dedicated to science content. So this figure is based on large-scale studies of English language podcasts. So it's not all podcasts. and identified around 950 active science podcast series out of tens of thousands of total podcasts available at the time of the study. So well done. We have a very knowledgeable audience. Now we can move to our speaker's presentation, and we will start with Ignasi. Ignasi, can you share your slides?
Good. Did I succeed?
Yes, well done.
Perfect.
So thank you very much. You can start.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really excited to talk here today about science communication. So first of all, I'm not a science communicator. I'm a researcher. And basically, what I do is I research about wild bees, like this one in the picture, which is a endemic wild bee from the southern Iberian Peninsula. But I'm also very interested in being sure that what the science we produce is uh, mm, shared with a wider audience and it matters. So I would like to bring up like two ideas today. The first one is that when we do science, when we do research, we are not in our silos, we are not doing research alone, but we interact with real world problems. So as researchers, I think we have the duty to acknowledge this and understand how our science will impact the wider society. And the second one is that science is built on trust relationships, and those are uh, very rewarding but also hard to get. So that's the two topics I would like to cover today. So let's start by the first one. And to be a bit controversial, I would start saying that science is political. Science is political in a sense that we, as scientists, as researchers, we have specific goals. We have a context, and we also can decide what do we want to study uh, and how we do that, and also in which context we want to do this. And if this sounds a bit abstract, I can put you a more clear example. So, for example, I have a clear goal, which is conserving pollinators. I think they are amazing, they are biodiverse, and they are important. And uh, and I have a desired output, which is a nicer conservation of pollinators. And acknowledging that is important. So I can study, for example, pollinators in the natural systems and see, for example, that larger patches of natural areas are good for sustaining more pollinators. But I can go beyond that. I can ask also how this affects, for example, the crops that are nearby the natural areas. And for example, pollinators when we conserve larger patches of natural areas nearby crops, we have some spillover, and pollinators also visit these crops, and we can measure how we have more pollinators in the crops. And we can even call that pollinator services. Um, and I can choose to stay there and just uh, have this idea of like conserving natural areas is good because we increase pollinators, and pollinators are good because we also increase visitation rates on crops. But if you talk to farmers, farmers doesn't really care about visitation rates. What they care is about production and yield. So it's interesting also to think like, should we also go one step further and measure the impact on yield? Which in this case, for some crops, we have an increase in yield, but that's not, it's not always the case. Like we also have studies where increasing pollinators is not directly linked to an increase in yield. And ultimately, farmers are also interested in the economic side. So we can do a lot of things about the ecological side, but we need to factor in which are the costs, for example, of promoting pollinators and which are the benefits of getting more pollinators and see if those are aligned or not. And be honest, when they are not aligned, maybe if we want to conserve pollinators while having productive systems, we need, for example, to think on subsidies. And which questions do we ask and which context do we want to interpret these results? I think it's important as researchers in the current situation. There's a second uh, issue I want to bring about researchers, which is that we like to dissect things. So we have our corner of a study system and we care about the pollinators of that field and what's going on, but everything is interconnected. And this is a very easy example to see that because, for example, using organic farming usually reduces pesticides and usually is better for biodiversity. In the European Union, around 7.5% of agriculture is now organic, and um, we can cheer for having this kind of agricultural practice because it's good for biodiversity. And we may be enhancing biodiversity in Europe. But as the world is interconnected, if that triggers um, the importation of food from elsewhere where the practices are not as sustainable, and probably we are destroying nature elsewhere, we are conserving pollinators in Europe, but at the same time, we are losing biodiversity elsewhere. So being aware of this interconnectedness, I think it's important. Otherwise, we risk proposing or suggesting practices that could work at the local scale, but have undesired consequences. So I hope I convince you that as researchers, we have some duties to go beyond our study research. And then I wonder, like, how do we deal with all this complexity? How we do reconcile all these matters? And I think there are three key points that I would like to discuss today. The first one is I think it's very important to be honest about your motivations. So as I said, I disclose that my goal, my objective is conserving biodiversity. And this is important because it shares the values I have, probably are the same values as many farmers, politicians, or other stakeholders have, and we can work in this framework. Second, it's super important to put evidence first. As I was saying, for example, not always increasing pollinators has an economic benefit. And this is important to be evidence-based. This evidence should be transparent and easy to reproduce. So we should put first the science. And lastly, we should be open-minded and think on the ramifications of our research, how our research will be used, who can misuse it, or can it have side effects that we are not taking into account. And all of these things have a thing in common, which is that you need to build trust relationships. So being honest about your motivations and sharing your values creates trust with your whoever you are communicating with. Showing the evidence and being very transparent and open on how we achieve this data, it's a way of ensuring that scientists are trust and we don't share just opinions, but we share uh, actual data with strong evidence. And we also acknowledge where we don't have this evidence and we need more research. And finally, by showing that we explore different scenarios, we go beyond our study system, we also share that we care in a profound way on what we are doing. So now that we know more or less that we need these trust relationships, let's see how we usually do it. Like a classical example on researcher way of doing things that we do our research, we get our results, we publish it, usually in a scientific paper, which has a very narrow audience, and many times it stops there. But things are changing, and this is improving a lot. And sometimes we go a bit beyond, and we're trying to do some outreach. We can do a quick video, or we can do blog posts, or have webinars like this one. And this is important. It helps communicating with other people, but it's known that just stating facts is very hard to change behaviors. And we've seen in that, for example, with worrying issues like climate change. Like we can show the facts, this is important, but this is not enough. And I want to share you as a final example how we approach that in the European project. It's a showcase. It's barely finishing. It's in the last months of the project, where we partner with ecologists, economists, and social scientists to conserve biodiversity in agricultural areas. That was our goal. And for that, we have a series of case studies across Europe, but I will explain just the case study that we did in the Guadalquivir river region in southern Spain. And we partnered there with a group of farmers to try to achieve this goal, conserving biodiversity in agricultural landscapes. What was our approach? So we gathered with these 18 different farmers across the Guadalquivir Valley, and we co-designed what we wanted to do. So we had meetings where we share our motivations and beliefs. We share how we want to preserve biodiversity and how we think this is possible without compromising productivity. And they share also their worries, for example, regarding pest control or volatility of the markets and what they need. And with all this information, we decided what to do. So it was really a joint effort. And I put this warning here that looks super beautiful, but this is a hard process. It requires time, it requires many meetings, it requires building trust and understanding each other's biases. For example, farmers are quite heavily influenced by both the EU policy and the agrochemical industry. So they have some constraints, and we as scientists, we also have our biases. So overcoming all these processes, I think is really worth it, but it requires long-term compromise. So what we end up doing, so we end up preparing experimental research where we decided to plant green covers in the underneath of the stone fruits. Those are peaches and nectarines mainly. And as a scientist, we provided, for example, a strong experimental design where we have controls, where there was a business as usual in real farms, and we have interventions where we seeded this understory with the plants that we agree all together along farmers could be beneficial both for biodiversity, for the farms, and didn't compromise the part of their job. For example, ensuring there is no weeds or any plant that could attract any pest. And we measure multiple things in this situation. So these are some examples. This is in the upper part. You can see how it's usually farmed in the Guadalquivir Valley. So they have heavy use of herbicides and machinery. So the rows between the trees are basically empty, both in spring, in the left, and in summer, in the right. And in the bottom is what we achieve with these plantings. So especially in the spring, it looks gorgeous, full of flowers. And even in summer, we still have quite a lot of plants that are flowering. Even if with the machinery going in and out, we see this is a bit reduced. But we have a quite change in the landscape. And what we found, of course, the plants, the richness of plants in the understory increase, especially for forbs that are flowery and good for pollinators. The pollinators dramatically increase. As you can see, the green boxes in the intervention are always above the orange boxes, which are the controls. And we also were tracking some active hunter spiders, which are a good proxy of pest control. Even there are many agents that control pests. Spiders was an easy group to measure. So we succeed in increasing biodiversity. What happened with yield? Yield was stable. And for me, this is a really good outcome. So would be even better if yield also increased, of course. But in reality, given that yield depends on many other things like water availability, fertilizers, and management, um, the effect of increasing biodiversity, at least in 2 years, was not an enhancing one, but clearly was neutral. That means that we are not compromising yield. We can conserve biodiversity while keeping the same yield. And this was enough for most of the farmers to have a change in behavior. And for me, that was the best output of the paper. Sorry, of the paper of the study, where after 2 years, many farmers just decided to use these green covers all over their farms. And this is not because they get a direct benefit of yield, but because they were motivated to increase biodiversity in their farms. Um, so as a wrap up, I think as a researchers, we should try to change how we approach this. And instead of saying, okay, we did this in this and these tests, we have this evidence, you should listen to us, we should start interacting with the stakeholders from the beginning. Identifying boundary concepts, things that can link both groups is important. In our case was biodiversity. Even for farmers, biodiversity means something different. Maybe for them it's pest control and pollinators than for researchers, which for me is endemic species and super rare cool bees. We have a common ground, which is biodiversity protection. And then we need to build trust with a good narrative. So we started with why are we here? Like sharing our values, like we care about biodiversity. And we can explain why we care, and using metaphors is important. So this is Spain. So of course, a good metaphor is using football. So when you have a football match, you don't care only about the best three players, or you don't even care even about the 11 players that are playing. You need a full team. So you have other players in case that some get injured. You have the coach, and you need the full set of biodiversity, the full set of players to have a good team. We then explain what we plan to do, like we what we can achieve. And here is where evidence is important. We are not marketing sellers. We are not going to say like biodiversity will make you better and we will be happier and we will be even more handsome. That's not the case. Like biodiversity can help in this and these regards. We have these and these unknowns, and we have an honest expectation. And finally, it's great to explain how we can do it. And for that, we are people. So we empathize with success stories. Like we don't want to see just crude statistics. We want to know what happened in other places. And now we have a good success story in this Guadalquivir region where we can show these farmers take these actions, and as a consequence, we have we achieve this increase in biodiversity without compromising yield. So more or less, this is what I wanted to explain today, and I think this could open the conversation to have more questions later. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ignasi. Very, very interesting presentation. And the results are also very interesting for us that work directly with farmers. It's very nice to see those results and see how you communicated these results with farmers. So you work with this complex ecological research. You mentioned that we need to be honest about our motivations. We need to put evidence and science first and be open-minded and putting our research first. So and with this, we build this trust relationship. So how do you decide what part of your work is more important to share when you talk to people outside the science world, like the general public or the farmers, for example?
That's a very good question. I think as researchers, our mindset is often in a very specific details. So something I learned to do by just doing it wrong many times is asking first, like, what do you want to know? And in that case, it's easier then to explain and to be in the same mindset. And also being honest, if what they want to know, you don't know it, it's okay. Then we can build a project and discover it. But asking first is an important point, which I didn't always do.
Yes, and for us that work directly with farmers, being aware of their challenges is very important for us also to decide what projects we want to propose to and to what proposals we want to apply in specific funding programs to help farmers having those challenges answered, right? So you mentioned also that the co-designing process is very challenging because the farmers are driven by policies, subsidies, and also by the companies involved in the production or selling pesticides or fertilizers. So I would say that they are also driven by the practices that their neighbor farmers are applying in their own farms. So what was your major challenge when trying to engage farmers into the project?
So, um, so to be honest, we created this community from scratch. So I think in starting with communities that have a long tradition, they know among each other, it helps. And also I think we need to create this culture of partnership between science and practice. And probably, as you see, the intervention that we did is not rocket science. I mean, it's just green covers. That's nothing that it's high risk, high gain in terms of a very novel approach. But it's a really good start to build trust. And for example, they were concerned about these green covers having negative effects on, for example, water deficit or things like that. So we can just try it in real life situations, measure everything they want to measure water in the soil, and show that this works. And from there, you can build and try to go to more complex interventions.
So can you share a moment where or a success story that can that have made a difference? So when approaching with farmers, do you have some success story to share or some story to tell us about a farmer that decided to change their practices?
Yeah, in fact, this was a 2 year a 2 year project because, as you know, every year is a bit different. So ideally, you want more, but 2 years is the minimum. And in the second year, some of the farmers just tell us like, okay, if that worked the first year, I'm just gonna put green covers all over. So we were risking having a control. Uh, so I was like, no, please wait. We need 1 more year of experiment just to make sure we can have this. And and this was for me the moment where it really clicked, like, okay, we are really having an impact.
Yeah. Do you have numbers on the impact of these practices? Do you know if other farmers changed their practices after you communicated the results of this project?
Yeah, it's very hard to track impact. And as you say, farmers talk among each other. I think that things go slowly. We are not the only ones proposing this. For example, the new uh, cap is partially aligned with these kind of practices, and sometimes there are incentives. So I think there is a bunch of initiatives trying to move in this direction. And I think we are all rowing in the same direction. So it's hard to know how this worked beyond the network of farmers that we were directly working. But I think clearly putting these examples of success makes it easier for other farmers to say, okay, that worked there, so I may try it, especially if there are other things going on in the same direction.
Yeah, and I think farmers are changing their practices if they see that their neighbor farmers are also changing and getting good results,
Mhm.
and that's always something that works with farmers from our experience. So, Ignasi, thank you very much for your presentation and for the discussion. We will now move to Adriano Cerqueira with his presentation about the 90 Seconds podcast. Thank you. I invite you to stay with us.
Thank you, Margarita. I just, before beginning, I'd like to say that Ignasi said he wasn't a science communicator. Well, I have to disagree. He's a good science communicator, even if that's not his official job. Hello everyone. I'm currently the producer of 90 Seconds of Science. I've been working on this podcast for about 9 years. And I will share with you how we work behind the scenes, and hopefully share some tips of how this podcast of how to better communicate your science or your particular field of study with the people who aren't knowledge about it. So let me try and share it.
Okay, can you share? Oh, I have a question here in the chat. Sorry, I didn't realize that. So, Ignasi, if you are available, could you answer Charles Okpala that put some question here on the chat, please?
Sure. Yeah, the questions are multiple, so I was reading it now.
Okay.
But I will try to go very quickly. Or should I do it in the chat?
You can write it in the chat, so we can move with Adriano's presentation. Thank you.
I don't mind if you want to do it orally.
It's because we have we have to run this in time, so it's better to move on. Thank you.
Okay, so let me share my presentation. Just a second. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, 90 Seconds of Science, or Notícias com Ciência in Portuguese, is a podcast that airs on Antena. Antena is Portugal's national public radio. Let me just tell you a bit about the background of our podcast. It started in 2016. It was created by António Granada and Joana Lubantes. You can see them two sitting here with the white shirt and the red shirt. And then I was invited to be the producer involved, technically the journalist responsible for this podcast. I also work with Paul Castaneda, which is the guy with the blue shirt, who does the sound mixing and post production of our episodes. Being the producer and journalist, I not only schedule the interviews, but I also travel around the country to interview the researchers and scientists, and I am also responsible for editing the episodes, the interviews, so they can fit in 19 seconds. Now, this is a very Herculean job because this podcast airs from Monday to Friday. We air about 240 episodes every year because we stop in August. During August, we only air episodes that have aired the previous year. We are 3 times a day, and we are available online on RTP Play and also on Spotify. And we have our own website that you can visit and not only see the current episodes, but also listen to the episodes from day one. And also read if we have every episode is transcribed and then rewritten like a news article, so that people who are hearing impaired can also get the same information that someone who is listening on the radio can. To choose who we interview is a bit of a long process, but we have it in a very factory way already, since we've been doing this for over 9 years actually. What we do is we look at several aspects of the science being produced before we choose the people that we are going to interview. We also have a very wide network with research institutes and universities around the country, of course. Our podcast is only in Portuguese. that allow us and facilitate the way that we can find the researchers and then set up the interviews with them. Normally, for example, I was in Coimbra a couple of weeks ago, and I recorded about 30 interviews. This was done for about a month before going there. I contacted Coimbra's University, and we showed a few about 30 scientists and projects that we then interviewed, and they will be airing in the over the next months. So to choose the scientists that we interview, we look at some factors. Some of these you probably already know. We see how current and newsworthy the content is. This means if if it's something that's new, if it was just published, and how relevant it is to to society as a whole, for example, or to the scientific fields. Our second point is how scientifically relevant it is. So if it's a research that's groundbreaking, or even if it's just basic science, what we're looking for is if it's something that's valid, that's being peer reviewed, that's being funded by either national, or European, or international. I'm missing a word, but funding projects. We also look if it has relevant outcomes. We try to avoid interviewing people who are just starting in their research project, because we find it a lot easier to communicate science to the public when we already have some data or some results. And we look at how it's being financed and how if it's part of an international network or not. We also look at the quality of the speaker themselves. This isn't like very important, because since it's an interview, I usually help and guide the researcher to help them find the correct metaphor, the correct analogy, or try to tune down the scientific jargon. You don't need to be a great science communicator to be interviewed for 90 Second Science, but if you are, that helps us a lot. It's a lot easier to edit an episode when we interview someone who has some experience in communicating science than when we do it with someone who's a novice who hasn't even been interviewed by a journalist before, which does happen a lot in this podcast. So I've already told you a bit how we find our researchers. Like I said, we have a big network in Portugal where we contact people from communication offices and institutes to help us find these the people that we interview. However, we also go individually. Sometimes people contact us, and then we have to veto them to see if the information that they're giving us is true or not. And we also had a couple of charlatans contact us before. That those are funny stories, but maybe for another time. And when we do that, or we look at research papers, and we then contact the person responsible for that paper so that we can interview. So after we do that, after that long process of choosing who we are going to interview, we need to validate with them and with their institutions, and then we schedule an interview that usually takes about an hour. So first we talk a lot, and I also ask a lot of questions about not only what they do, but about scientific concepts. Even the ones that I already know about, I always like to test them again so I can see how the person explains them. And then we try and work together to find a way to make the interview more easily accessible for the people who are going to listen and who might not be experts in this particular field. We see 90 second science as a way for like a little snack of science, so a little snack of content that someone is going to listen on their way to work or on their morning jog. and they're going to, oh, this is funny, this is interesting, let me go check more at home and learn more about this project, about this person, or about this scientific field. And that's what we try to do when we are trying to build the episode. The episode is starts being built during the interview itself. So after this conversation, which usually takes about half an hour, sometimes less, sometimes more, then we record a normal interview about 10 minutes long. Sometimes it's longer. It really depends on the person that I'm interviewing. There are people who like to talk a lot, others who don't, so it varies a lot. But usually, I'd say on average, it's about 10 minutes, and those 10 minutes get edited down to the 90 seconds that you will listen to. So this is how a typical episode is structured. So we have a short jingle at the beginning, and also an outro at the end. In the middle, it's what's important. Well, we always ask the person to do a short introduction, because in this podcast, my voice doesn't show. It's only the researcher's voice. One of our models is giving voice to the researchers. So researchers slash scientists. So they usually present themselves and then they start talking. I usually try to guide them in this way or edit them in this way, but obviously it depends a lot from field to field. I might interview someone in social sciences or in the arts, or someone in engineering or natural sciences. So each field has their own characteristics, and sometimes this formula might not work as well for their field in particular. So it varies a lot, but usually this is the way that our episodes are structured. So we begin with a context of the problem, what's going on, what's relevant, why are we researching this subject. Then we go into methodology, not to get too specific, because most people will not be interested in what type of chemicals are you using, or what type of techniques are you using, but we sometimes just a little brief description of what they're doing to reach these results, so that the people who are listening in can understand the scientific method that's being used in this particular research. And then we talk about outputs. Usually this is where most episodes end, but when we have a little bit more time, I also like to, and when it makes sense, for example, if it's something that's very basic science, well, you're not going to have outputs that people are going to understand or see, but you can talk about how this might apply one day in the future to other fields, especially when we're talking about, for example, physics. Usually they might be very complex issues, but in the future they will see applications in, for example, medical instruments. And that's a way to try and transform something that's very complex into something that's accessible for the listeners. So in the beginning, they might think, okay, there's some jargon here, it's maybe a little confusing. I'm understanding that they're doing something in physics. Why are they doing this? Oh, wait. So they're doing this because one day it might help us, learn more about a certain disease or know more about the universe. So this is typically how we structure the episode, and I usually type of tips that I give the researchers are usually how more to have to do to how they can cut down on the jargon that they're using, but I also try to help them with metaphors and analogies. One thing that I when I do these types of presentations or workshops, I usually tell the people who are there and who are researchers or who are going to be interviewed one day, is that some of the mistakes that I see, for example, a lot of people tend to bring paper with all their speech written down. Never do that. Please never do that. You are going to be so focused on trying to say every word correctly that you are going to mess up. And then you are going to get nervous, and then it's going to be very difficult to get back on track. What I do say is that, well, sometimes you do need some information. So what you should do is do it as bullet points. So if you bring a paper with only bullet points of the main things that you need to say, not written down as a paragraph, just a couple of bullet points, a couple of information, some data. Or the part about the funding is always really important that you bring, because sometimes it's obligatory to say it when you are talking about a certain project, especially if it's European funded, with EU funding. So yeah, don't bring a complete text of what you're going to say. Just bring a few bullet points. And if you're having trouble remembering what you need to say, look at them, see, oh, yeah, right, I need to talk about this or that. And that will help you a lot more than if you bring a complete text. And I know this is very specific to this podcast, but a lot of people also sometimes bring complete speeches when they're going to be interviewed with journalists, for example, the nightly news. And yeah, don't do that. Bullet points and maybe just some graphs if you need or if you want to show them, but mostly just trying to, the simpler the better. So as I said, we've had this podcast for about 9 years. We've recently crossed episode 2000, and we've covered most of Portugal's area. We still have a few districts that we haven't been there yet, but we hopefully before our 10-year mark, we hope to get them all. And as you see, there's a bit more concentrated in some of the more urban areas, because that's where the biggest universities are, but we go all over the place. Our podcast is also very gender, tries to get gender equality, especially in Portugal. There are more women researchers than there are men. However, we are sitting at 50-50 for almost for now. I think that in the next year we will probably pass that. And we also tried to see that our episode themes sort of reflect the funding of several scientific areas in Portugal. So that's why we end up having a lot more episodes on engineering and health than we do, for example, on about law or economics, because those areas have a lot more funding than the other ones. So we try to reflect that, and also if there's more funding, there's more people working on them, so we end up having more episodes about that. But we try to interview people from the whole spectrum of science research, from the arts, like I said before, to health, engineering, and natural science. And well, that's all that I prepared for today. You can reach us on our website. Well, it's all in Portuguese, but I guess you can use Google Translate to read it if you don't speak the language. And you can also follow us on Twitter. I know it's called X, but I refuse to call it X. And also Facebook. So if you have any questions.
Thank you, Adriano. Thank you so much. Yes, if you have any questions, please write those on the chat. I promise not to forget those questions this time. So thank you and congratulations for the podcast. Is really interesting. So when creating this 90 seconds of science, you go from like 20 minutes interview to 90 seconds, and this might be a big challenge. So how do you decide what part of the researcher's story or the project to focus on? How do you pick the part of the research story that you think will grab people's attention?
Well, that's actually the hardest part, and sometimes, well, there's this phrase in screenwriting that you need to kill your babies. And that's something that we have to do a lot. This not literally means killing babies. It means that sometimes you have an idea that you think is really good, but it doesn't really work. So sometimes you need to just not do it. And we, sadly, in this podcast, we do that a lot. So what I usually do, that's why the interviews are so long, because sometimes people just have a lot of interesting things to say and from very different perspectives. So what I usually do is I edit the 90 seconds, but I don't edit only one episode. For each person has about 3, sometimes 4 versions for each episode, which I try to different perspectives. Then we have an editor, one of the creators of the podcast, who chooses which one is going to air. What I usually do is I try to focus also on something that might be a bit boring, but how the person is saying the words. Because if it's, since I have to edit it to make it look like the person said it all in just 90 seconds in a coherent way, sometimes they might be saying something very interesting, but if it doesn't add with their introduction or with some other part that's also important, I cannot use that. And sadly, that happens a lot because they change their tone. Sometimes at the end of the interview, they're like laughing more or they're a bit more jovial. You know, I have to, but then it doesn't fit because in the beginning they're very serious or sometimes a little bit nervous. So the voice is different. I cannot put them together. But usually I look at things like I said before, results, applications, metaphors. Those are the ones that hurt me the most because sometimes people have great metaphors and analogies, but they just either take too long to do them or they're not they don't fit. There's more important things to say than the analogy that they use, and I have to cut them. And it's really sad because sometimes they're very creative with the analogies that they use. I can't think of any at the top of my head. I'm sorry, but so yeah, I try to juggle these various aspects of editing.
Yes, and you have so many episodes. You must have learned a lot through all these episodes. So it's almost 2000, right?
Yeah. We've passed 2000 a couple of weeks ago.
So it's amazing. So we have a question in the chat. How do you find your speakers? Do researchers reach out to you? Do you give opportunity to PhD students or early career researchers to present their research?
I already covered this in the presentation.
Yeah. I think you already replied. Yeah, yes. So,
but yes, we do cover PhD students, even masters, people who are just finished their masters. So you don't have to have a PhD. You just have to have some research that's either published or interesting enough to be interviewed. Also, we usually don't do preprints. So it has to be peer reviewed and validated by peers or by a university. So that valid.
And the podcast is in Portuguese. Have you reached researchers that are out of Portugal but are Portuguese researchers?
Well, two things. We usually interview people who are Portuguese and working outside Portugal when they are here. So we usually don't travel to just interview one person. So when they're here, for example, visiting family or at a conference, then we interview them. But we also interview people who are working in Portugal who are not Portuguese, but they have to speak the language. So we've had a lot of people from Brazil and from Cape Verde, Angola, obviously. But we've also had people from Spain, Italy, we even have someone from the Netherlands who, their Portuguese wasn't the best, but it was, was good enough for to air on the radio. So yeah, we also look to people who are not Portuguese but work in Portugal.
So I'm from Alentejo, and I was sad to see that Beja district does not have yet a 90 seconds of science podcast episode. So hopefully we will have a few in the future. Also, Trás-os-Montes and Minho seem to be.
No, they had.
They have? Okay.
Yeah. Only Viana do Castelo does.
Okay. Viana do Castelo, yeah. So are you trying to reach researchers from those research institutes like polytechnical institutes?
Yes. I try. So since we are very dependent on the science offices or the communication offices, sometimes it's just hard. I've been trying to contact a lot of those places, but just haven't gotten any answer. So since we have a lot of solicitations from other places, then those end up getting to the back end of our work. We also have this philosophy that people don't reach out to us or they don't care, then okay, we're going to move on. So I guess it's also a little on their side to come to us and to give us a few propositions, and then we'll analyze and see if they're then we can set up a date to interview the researchers. Individually, I have contacted some from, for example, from Brazil, but to no luck so far.
Okay, so keep trying.
Yes.
So how do you see, how do you measure the impact of the podcasts? So, and do you have I don't know how this could be measured, likes in the podcast comments? How do you measure the impact of your podcasts?
Yeah, we actually have a student researcher who's doing his PhD on not only 90-second science, but also 90-second science. And he's currently doing that, so we hope to have some more information. What we do usually is look at audience and like how many people are listening to us on podcasts at FTP Play or at Spotify. And we also, because the truth is that our comments usually are just people giving congratulations to the researcher of the day, because on our social media the episode is always accompanied by a photo of the person. So a lot of their family members, students, friends just go there and just like congratulate them. We don't have a lot of discussions on our social media. Sadly, I would love to see discussions, especially when we talk about some topics that are, that rise some emotions with some people. But sadly, most of our comments are just people giving congratulations like that. So what we measure is how many people are listening to us, where they're from, how old they are, that we know. But we would also like to know if people are actually learning something from it. I have a story that the researcher told me that when she was going, she always took the bus from work to home every day in Paredes, I think. And the driver of the bus was a fan of our show, so he always tuned into Intenon at the time, and everybody on the bus listened to it, and people were like discussing the episode, and like old people were asking, "Oh, so what did you like today? Oh, I like this and that." So yeah, I'm not sure how many bus drivers are there who like our show, but if there's more than one, then I guess we'll have a lot more impact to research than we thought.
And do you see a trend on the topics that are like hot topics in your podcast?
Yeah, like I said in the presentation, we try to follow the funding. So when, for example, AI all over, if there's a week where we don't have an episode about AI, then I guess something went wrong. We did it on purpose because AI is all over the place. It has been basically since the beginning of the podcast. I remember interviewing people 9 years ago about machine learning. So yeah. And also other fields. For example, when the mRNA vaccines first came, we actually had already about 1 or 2 episodes about them before the pandemic. But then suddenly we've got a lot more. Science follows the funding, and we also follow the funding.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adriano. We move now to Carol. Carol's presentation. It was very nice to hear your presentation and the discussion. Thank you. Carol?
Okay, Margarida, thank you. Thank you, Adriano and Ignasi, for sharing before. It was very interesting to learn from you as well. Let me just share here my screen. Wait a second. Yes, this one. Are you seeing this in presentation mode right now?
Yes, in presentation mode.
Okay, so let's go for it. Today we're going to talk about a very interesting journey that went through in the ReSEED project. And this is because the ReSEED project was, how can I say that in a few words? It was for me like the proof that science communication, it's a challenge, but it can be very exciting and a learning process day by day. I'm here because from December 2018 to October 2023, I did the science communication and project management for this project called ReSEED. Right now, I am in another path towards open science. So I work in OPERES, which is research infrastructure dedicated to open scholarly communication. But here, as I said, I'm going to talk about the ReSEED project and my journey there. The ReSEED project is based at the University of Coimbra, in the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. It's led by Dulce Freire, who I have the pleasure to see here again in this session, though she's here. And the ReSEED project aiming to look back to the past and understanding the changes in our agriculture related to the seeds, especially that came from the new worlds. So when you think about potatoes, tomatoes, avocado, and diverse beans that came from the Americas, for example, how did they change agriculture in Europe? What are the changes, the socio-economical, ecological impacts? How this changed the agriculture in this continent throughout the last centuries? So it's a very interesting journey that I have to go from here to the past in a very long-term analysis and also in a very interdisciplinary in a collaborative approach. That's how the ReSEED project has been happening. It got an extension, so it's in the final months right now. But it's key to say that when you think of studying the past to even better think the future, it should be a long-term analysis and very interdisciplinary in the case of this project. We had lots of sources to work with. When you think about a project like the ReSEED, we had manuscripts, we have historical books, we have botanic illustrations, the seeds themselves, herbaria, and of course, people, the farmers, especially the ones who still remember how was the work in the last century, during the last decades of the 20th century. So the material we had to communicate was diverse and really, really great. For the ReSEED project being funded by the European Research Council, it's in the grant agreement. The communication is an obligation. We have to communicate and promote the results of the project for diverse audiences in a very strategic way. But to us in the ReSEED project, it is above all a commitment since the beginning. We want to explain to citizens this public funding is being used on what? So to us, as I said, it's a commitment more than an obligation. And this is how we felt it since the beginning. So for us also, we also had it very clear since the beginning of the project that when you think about dissemination, we are thinking about this diffusion within the scientific community. But we also wanted to communicate the project throughout the journey, thinking about diverse stakeholders, different audiences, and not only the result, but also how we do the scientific process itself, bringing people together to the process, to the scientific process, helping people understand also how this process takes place, not only understanding the results. So since the first beginning, we created a communication plan, and we wanted to understand the main target audiences for the project, what are the methods we wanted to deliver for each of these audiences, the impact we wanted to achieve, the media, the channels, which could be more effective, and of course the time, how could we reach out to these audiences in which timing, depending on each case. And we had some premises that we followed throughout the project. The first one was, of course, we want to demonstrate the impact of the project, but do not exaggerate because it's only one project. We are contributing a little bit to a broader context of science. We have never liked much talking about translating content. I always prefer to think about bringing people together with us and not about translating much. As you said at the beginning, Margarida, storytelling is, of course, an excellent way to achieve this. And we try to use the visuals whenever possible to make this communication more effective. It's very interesting when you also learn from other projects. In our case, while ReSEED was taking place, also the Quest project was happening. And the Quest project brought some interesting quality indicators for science communication. So we also try to follow these quality indicators, of course, thinking of scientific rigor. How can we do better presentations, be in context, be coherent, be clear, and connecting with the society, being responsible, being relatable, impactful, and in a two-way communication. Never top down, but positioning us in the same level of our other stakeholders and trying to bridge and trying to bring dialogue for the scientific process. For the online communication, we had here in the bottom right, we have our website, ReSEED. On the top left, we have the blog. I'm going to talk about it, the Seeding Ideas blog. It was one of the most interesting things we created throughout the project. We chose, by the time we started the project, which was 2018, to do our social media communication into Facebook and at that time, Twitter. So these were the two social media networks we chose at that time, especially because we wanted to use both visuals and text. So that's the reason why we chose these two ones. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of them very soon. Here I can show you some examples of some posts. You can see on the left that the ones from Twitter, we normally use English because our goal in Twitter was to communicate with the scientific community and beyond Portugal. So we opted for using English. On the other hand, in Facebook, we chose the language depending on the context. ReSEED is an Iberian project. So sometimes we talked in Portuguese. Sometimes when you're talking about the Spanish context, we prefer to create the posts in Spanish. And sometimes, because we had a case study in Galicia, we even used Galician to communicate with the people there. So we had this choice of using English when it was like a broader topic in Facebook, all the time in Twitter English, but in Facebook, whenever it was about a specific topic that could be interesting for local communities, we decided to use the local languages. It's more or less what I've just told you here. Twitter, so when I left the project, was more or less 700 followers in English. Facebook, we reached 2,000 followers in diverse languages. As I said, we try to keep a frequency of once a week at least. And we created a very interesting flow on how to create the social media posts. So for each content, I chose the post ambassador. So it's one of our researchers from our team who works closely to that topic. And that person helped me creating each poster. So with this person, we decided the framing, the best historical sources to use in the post, because we didn't want just to talk and use current pictures. We really wanted to bring for the audiences the sources we used in the project. So we used to choose together the frame, the historical sources, other images, and I talked to this post ambassador, which is this researcher more closely to that topic. Then I use it to write the text, and the researcher used it to revise it. And then we decided to define our content, and we finally post it. But whenever it comes to the interaction with the audiences, we always use to do this like together, to always try to reply to the questions and keep the dialogue open with our followers in social media. The other thing that this is my preferred one, I have to confess, and Dulce Freire knows about it. We created this blog called the Seeding Ideas, and it was an opportunity for the researchers to talk more freely about their research, not only the topics directly related to ReSEED, but also indirectly related. So we have been crossing paths with lots of researchers for diverse areas. So botanic, from archaeologists, lots of different researchers collaborated with us. So we offered them this opportunity to talk about their work in this blog. And it was a very interesting journey. So every month we had one post. These posts were 800 words to 1,000 words, always with images. And it's a more informal way to talk to people. And in Seeding Ideas blog ended up being very interesting, bringing ideas, findings, discussions to our research journey as well. The main audience of this blog was not only scientific community, it ended up also reaching more people for the feedback we got throughout the project. Then another way to communicate is throughout the collaborations we did in the project. For example, one collaboration we did was called Changing Times, Changing Wheels. And everything started with this book that you can see here in the image. It was a manuscript from 1715. It was closed for more than 100 years at the National Library in Portugal. So we found this book, it was transcribed, and it contains the first Portuguese recipes with these products from the New World. So tomato, potato, pepper, sweet potato, very interesting recipes written by this cook, Francisco Borges Henriques. What we did with this book, we went to the historical school for culinary, and we asked the students, how can we cook these hundreds of recipes from the 18th century according to the current requirements of healthy, tasty, and sustainable food? So challenge accepted. They started analyzing the recipes and creating their own recipes. So we ended up having like very creative and new recipes based on these 18th century recipes that we found in that book. At the end, on the left, you can see the transcription of the book and the study of that book, which is led by Dulce Freire, this book on the left. Of course, we followed all the step-by-step process with the students on social media. We created a video about this process on how we came from the book to the recipes. There is an online ebook free to everyone where you can see all the recipes and the new recipes created by the students. And we also tried to do a tasting, which took place, but unfortunately the pandemic was a huge challenge, so we had to reduce this event for a more like very smaller tasting, but it took place at the National Library of Portugal. Then also we did diverse types of events, thinking of diverse audiences. I brought some examples for you. One was a workshop we organized with the National Institute for Agrarian and Veterinary Research, INIAV. So we, together with the researchers from INIAV, we discussed how to better communicate science on agriculture. We had a roundtable and then a very practical workshop. Another moment we had with a broader audience was in the International Science Festival. One of the things we did there was in 2021, we did a roundtable about the disappearance of local varieties. We also, yearly, we organize the events for the European Researchers' Night in Coimbra. Every year, a different topic. It was always a very interesting experience, explain the students to other people, to everyone that went throughout our work, bringing them some challenges, explaining concepts, bringing them closer to our research. And we have never forgotten the children. So we also did specific sessions in schools in Lisbon. Unfortunately, we didn't go beyond Lisbon, but we did it with hundreds of students, of children, explaining them the historical journey of the seeds, asking them questions about the relation with the seeds and the importance of learning about the seeds and preserving the seeds. This again was a very rewarding moment of this journey in the ReSEED, because it's always very nice to me to work with children. And finally, it's just four takeaways from this journey. We tried all the time to reinforce that scientists are not only STEM professionals in wide lab coats with test tubes. So we always try to make people understand that researchers from social science and humanities are researchers as well. We portray them in diverse environments, historical archives, libraries, seed banks, trying to contribute to a more diverse public image of scientists. And as I said before, we brought historical sources. We try to contextualize our work, showcasing our sources, trying to contribute to more science literacy. So instead of just bringing results, trying to make them understand with which types of sources we work, how hard it is, what are the challenges, so people can be closer to the process, not only to the results. We also, as I said, trying to keep the open dialogue with our audiences. Sometimes it took a day to answer one question from one social media post, but we try to go after these answers, do more research if necessary, so people could feel that their doubts are listened and we could keep in dialogue with them. And especially in the case of the historical research, it's very common that people think, oh, it's very cute, it's very curious. So we try always to avoid presenting information just as curiosities. It can be curious data, but we consistently provided reference to historical sources, trying to show people that there's a value as a scientific source, not just a couple of curiosities. So these are some of the lessons we had throughout this journey. And this is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. Very interesting. And thank you also for your enthusiasm, because it was very, very interesting. So I don't know if you have any question in the chat. We have a question about the ebook. So can you just put the link here on the chat after?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
because I think everyone is interested in having this ebook with the recipes.
So interesting.
Yes, it's very, very interesting. I will, Adriano, if you want, you can have a question now.
No, I just wanted to know if any of the recipes were good.
Sorry, I didn't understand. Adriano, if you wanted the recipes?
If any of them were good, then which one was your favorite?
I can show you. I mean, or later I can show you. That's one that's a coulis. It's like with tomatoes that I really love. I tried while the student was preparing, and it was my favorite one. It's with a coulis that he did with tomatoes. Yeah.
Which is very interesting, because all these very fancy recipes were already done in the past. Or they adapted the recipes.
They had to adapt because there are some ingredients that don't exist anymore. Some ingredients are now forbidden. So the cooking techniques, some of them don't exist anymore. So they had to be very creative. They have to do research. They had to understand how to translate it to the current patterns. And that's the beauty of this process. What's really interesting.
So what challenges have you faced when measuring the impact of your communication in this project?
We tried the closest information we got, apart from informal feedback. We did a survey with our followers in the middle of the project. So we launched a survey and we got dozens of answers. So this was the most practical and insightful information we had, apart from some informal feedback we got throughout the project. But we did a survey, yes, at some point to understand if our communication was in the right path.
And you mentioned the storytelling and the power of storytelling. Do you have any example to share? Have you used this technique to share the results of the project?
Yes, for example, when we tried to portray some of the farmers. So imagine when we have this, when we went for the field work. So researchers, we had this very close communication and collaboration with the researchers, because I was not there at the time with them. Mostly they were there doing their work, but we had lots of workshops so I could pass to them some of the techniques of communication. So they learned the importance of communication since the beginning, and they went to the field work aware that they could have different eyes as well to that field work, not only as a scientist, but also as a communicator. So lots of times they came back with stories. So look, this farmer I interviewed, he has this very interesting story. So we decided to tell these stories that came from the field work. So it was about literally telling stories that came from the field work. About how they, and now I cannot remember one specific story, but we had several moments where we just told people stories starting from the characters, which are the farmers. And it was really interesting throughout the project.
And you, in your communication plan, you decided to, for example, in the context of the social media, you decided to have an account on Twitter, more for the scientific community, and Facebook more to the general public, right? So if you were implementing this project right now, what would you change? So what new social media approaches would you implement right now?
My personal view, of course, if I was doing right now, I would have to discuss it with the principal investigator of the project, which is here, which is Freire. But in my personal view, due to some political change in the way X is right now, I wouldn't go to X. I would rather go to Blue Sky, where right now researchers are building a community. So from my current, in my current employment, we did this move. So we left X and we joined Blue Sky. And then we are managing to create a dialogue with scientists there right now. So probably would be Blue Sky, not X or Twitter at this point. And probably Instagram, although would have to probably invest more in the types of posts, like, change a bit the way of posting, less text. And even if we use text, more in the images than in the captions, let's say like this.
And about TikTok?
Then I think I need to be
to reach the youngest.
I would have to think about it. I think it's an interesting way, but maybe I would need to train a little bit more on this because it's not from my generation. So I would need to learn more before telling you something more at this point. But yes, indeed, it's right now to reach youngers. It's the right platform to be.
So I think we are reaching the end of our webinar. So I will have a question for all of you. Do you have any tips or techniques for scientists who want to communicate their research into a clear core message that you would like to highlight now? I can start with Ignasi because it was the first one to present. So.
Yeah, I think I would just echo what I said, that before communicating what you want to say, you need to connect with your audience and try to understand also where they come from, what are their interests, and try to tailor the message to different audiences. So my narrative is very different when I talk with policy makers than when I talk with farmers.
Okay, it's true. Okay. And Adriano.
I think just go for it. Be where the people are. So be on social media. Try to create something of your own and try to have fun mostly. Because sometimes I feel that people when they go into science communication, or researchers when they feel like they need to communicate something, they do it more either because they have to do it because it's in their contract or something. And I think most of it, the people that I like to talk to more, that I like to listen more, are the ones who are really enthusiastic about what they do. So if you have fun while doing it, it'll be a lot more effective. So if you're trying to communicate your science through social media or whatever it is, also put some passion into it, some emotion into it, and people really respond well to it.
Thank you. And Carol?
I would say less is more, in the sense that we have so many things in a research project, in a research. Whenever you try to communicate, choose one topic or two. Do not try to address everything in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So choose one topic and go deeper if you can. I think it's good because sometimes I heard so many times like, but it's impossible not to talk about this. We should talk about this. Really? Let's think of what's the best message to that audience. So talk a little bit less about everything and a bit more of one thing that can be more impactful. So this would be my tip.
And Adriano knows that it's possible to do it in 90 seconds, right? So thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. It was really a big pleasure to have you with us today. Big thank you. And I can say now that if those want participation certificate, please reply to the short quiz we have prepared. We have a link in the chat. I think Rita will copy and paste the link to the chat. And that's it. I think we reach the end of today's conversation and the final session of our webinar series. And a big thank you to all of you. It was a pleasure having you all here today. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.